Welcome back to the day 4 of the pre-week in software quality assurance testing. We talked about SQL yesterday, and now we're going to move on to a very interesting programming language called Python. Right? It's actually quite simple when you compare it to other programming languages, but at the same time complex, but not complicated, right? So let's quickly look at the 5 days agenda. We have talked about testing in general and software testing in day 1. We created a test case, we executed the test case. As you remember, we talked about requirements and why requirements are so important, and that's where we actually get our expected conditions so that we can compare against the actual results and then report the differences as defects or bugs, right? That was the topic of the day 2. So day 2, we talked about bug life cycle, defect life cycle, how defects come to existence and then how they go, circulate through the teams and go back and forth between the QA team and development team. And at the end, how those defects get resolved and closed. Happy end, basically. So yesterday we talked about SQL. So SQL, the purpose of SQL or SQL was to communicate with the database or the data layer of the software, right? To talk to the database, to get some data, some information from the database. So you saw or you learn how to write basic SQL statements, like we did yesterday, like select star from the table name. So just give me all the information from the table, basically. So today we're going to focus on Python. So you will be able to actually practice Python on your own as well, similar to what we did yesterday. And tomorrow will be dedicated for test automation and basics. All right, so with that being said, let's move on. So Python language. So what it is like to learn the Python language or any other programming language. It is actually like learning a foreign language, right? Let's say it's, Italian. You're trying to learn Italian, and learning curve at the beginning would be a bit steep and you really have to put a lot of effort. But you will start seeing the results if you practice, right? If you just, fearlessly start speaking the language, right? So you should not be afraid of speaking the language or practicing the language. So just like that, whenever you're learning a programming language, so you should be able to you should be ready to practice, basically, with even though you're running into issues, you're running into mistakes, and that's part of the learning process. So you should not be afraid of making mistakes, and you should be practicing a lot. And as part of the course, we provide homework apart from what you actually do during the classes. So those homeworks actually help you with gaining more experience and more confidence with the language. And in fact, the language itself is also very, I would say, informative and communicative. So whenever you make any mistake, it will tell you. Python will tell you that you're making some mistake, and then you will learn how to read the error messages and then correct your code based on the error messages as well. That's something that we're going to look into today as well. So before we actually start typing the code, let me just give you this small phrase here. That's hello world. So hello world is normally the first line of code that any programmer types in whenever they're learning that language for the first time. So it's the first line of code that is basically that you're going to do or use in any language. So without further delay, let's try that. I'm going to give you the link to a Python platform, basically, where you can actually type in a code and then see the result. So I'll just put that in a chat so you can go to that link. So I just shared with everybody, and I myself will also go to that link. All right, so it is right here. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to write a built-in function called print. So you don't have to worry about the terminology at the moment, but it's the purpose of that function is basically to print that hello world phrase or the sentence to the terminal. All right, so let's write it here. So we're just going to say hello world and click the run button. And on the right hand side, as you can see, we just printed that hello world phrase to the terminal. Now, what is a terminal? Terminal is a command line interface. You see, interfaces can be graphical user interface, the one where you can actually click and drag and drop, maybe touch if it's on a mobile device. But there are also interface where you can't, there are no buttons, where there's only commands, right? You interact with commands. You probably have seen that maybe in movies where, it's a black screen, and in that black screen, lots of codes are going on, and looks like someone is trying to hack the system. And this is what the terminal is. So I can show you another example of what the terminal is from Windows. So if you're in a Windows platform, if you just go to your search here on the left-hand side and type in command prompt or CMD, it will actually open another little pop-up black screen or window here, which is also called as a terminal. And I'm sure you have a terminal in your Mac machine as well, right? So that's a terminal. And if you're, in the actual work environment, you will not be using a website like this to type in your code for Python. You will be using a tool similar to this, right? So this is the tool that we actually provide to our students. It's called Visual Studio Code. And this is where you're going to actually develop your code, automation script, and so on. So what you're seeing at the top is where you will be writing your code, and what you're seeing at the bottom here is the terminal. You see, it says terminal. So I could, do the same thing here to say print and hello world, and then go ahead and run the script, and you can see in the terminal that it just printed saying hello world. Okay, so, but for the purposes of this session, we will be using this platform. So try on your own end as well. Try to print hello world. I'll talk about terminal a little later in detail as well. So this is the first line of code that you kind of learned, and it doesn't have to be hello world. So you could just put in your own name or and then try to print. So on the left-hand side is the box where you write your code, and on the right-hand side you see the results, right? This is where you kind of practice learning the language. So one important thing whenever you're learning any programming language is that you have to admit that you will be making mistakes, like I said earlier, right? So let's just go back to one very important concept here. So you will be making mistakes, and it is actually part of the learning process. And just remember this word fail, and fail is what? It's the first attempt in learning. And Python will actually tell you what kind of error you just made. And there are different types of errors that comes up as a message in in your terminal. So, and then some of the famous or frequently seen errors are listed here, like a name error, syntax sounds familiar. So if you were learning in Italian or French, and if you made a mistake in the way that you put your words, right, the order of the words that you were using, then your teacher in Italian would tell you like, oh, your syntax is wrong. So you have to change your syntax a little bit and then put that word before the other word or something like that, right? So, or maybe you're missing a quotation mark or something like dot or comma. So similar to that, in programming as well, it will actually tell you what type of mistake you just made. So let's just go back to the terminal and then try to make a mistake, right? So how about instead of saying print, I'm gonna make a typo here, and I'm just gonna skip the letter I, and it's just gonna be PRNT, and run. Here we go. We got our first error message. Now, here's one important lesson to learn. You will be reading your error messages from bottom to top, right? It's kind of backwards. So whenever you're reading a paragraph, you would start from the top to bottom. But when you're reading error messages, you start from bottom to top, because the first line that you see at the bottom will actually tell you what type of error you just faced, right? So let's read. It says name error, name, and then PRNT is not defined. So what the Python is trying to tell you is that I don't know, I'm not familiar with that function. What is this PRNT? What is that, right? So if I put it back, then it recognizes, oh, okay, I know what you're asking. You are asking me to print the word to the terminal, right? Now, so this is a typo, and then that you could make, and then might be surprised like what's happening. And at that point, always pay attention and then read the error message, right? Just read the error message, and it will tell you, it will give you a hint at least, right? It's giving us this exact line here, and then saying in line 1, you have a name error, and then the name is this print is not defined. Now, how about here's another frequently seen mistake. We put a capital letter instead of a uppercase letter P instead of a lowercase letter P, and then try. Right? We got the name error. Now this is when we started talking about case sensitivity. What is case sensitivity? It means the system treats the uppercase letters and lowercase letters differently. So for Python, uppercase A is not the same thing as the lowercase a. Now this is a little different from the SQL that you learned yesterday, right? So if we just go back to the SQL here, this is I just jumped back to the SQL Server Management Studio from yesterday. So I'm selecting everything from person.person table. So if I select, yeah, it's working. But how about if I just put it with the lowercase? It's still working. And then lowercase, uppercase, uppercase and lowercase from, and that would still work. But it's a recommended way of writing is actually the keywords like select and from should be typed in with uppercase letters, but this is just again a recommendation. But The system is not case sensitive, okay? But the Python is. So that's another frequently made mistake. Just switch it back. Now, here's another mistake here. So remember, anything that's opened, like a parentheses, needs to be closed at some point, right? So we opened the parentheses here, and then we forgot to close. Then we click run. Now, let's read the error message. We're getting a little different type of error message this time. Instead of a name error, now it's giving a syntax error, right? So it's saying, right, it's actually giving you, telling you where exactly, right, not in this, okay. So anyways, it's telling you that it's a syntax error. And whenever it says syntax error, it is looking for some symbol that's missing, probably. Some symbol is missing, and it is, in this case, is parentheses. So how about this time, I'm just going to take away the single quote or quotation mark, right? And then run it again. We again reached a syntax error here. Now this time Python was a bit more informative, and it is actually giving us the exact location. You see that you know, arrow up, arrow here. It's telling us that right here you're missing something, right? You're missing something, and then EOL stands for end of line. But you know, that's the most important information that you need to pay attention to is the name of the error or the type of the error that you just made. And then this will actually help you to correct your mistake, right? So if you learn how to work with the error messages, it's going to make your life a lot easier, right? Some people, you know, they tend to ignore the error messages, and that's not gonna help. So you won't be able to proceed or continue learning and improve if you don't become you know, sort of like familiar with the error messages. It is just accept that as part of daily work, daily life of any programmer or any QA engineer, that you will be working with the error messages. You will be actually expecting error messages, and you will be handling them as well, right? So we'll talk about that separately, right? So there will be certain cases that you know that error message will happen, and then you will handle it with a different, you know, line of code. So all right, so we talked about different types of error message or situations where you can get like a name error and syntax error. Okay. All right, so let's yes, so there's a question, could you please explain how to do debugging? So debugging, that's another terminology that is part of a programmer or anybody who's actually writing a code, right? So as I said, part of debugging is actually reading the error messages, but there's also you know, special approach of actually debugging step by step through your code. And that's, you know, something that would be a bit more complicated to cover as part of this lesson, where there's a line of code that you're gonna put, and then your code will be actually executed step by step, because you're gonna have like numerous, you know, steps that are happening right after each other, and sometimes it's difficult to catch and see what exactly is happening, right? So and there's a special approach for that as well, which we certainly can cover as part of our courses. But for this lesson, let's move on to understanding the data types. Let's move on to understanding the data types, right? Because that's the next important concept that you need to be familiar with before we move any further. So strings. What are the strings? So if you just pay attention to this picture here, string is a bunch of letters, or let's say symbols or letters or characters that are attached to each other using a string, and that's why it's called a string, right? And normally, if we give a more simple explanation or definition, string is just the text surrounded by quotes, right? For example, it's a name. Your name would be an information that can be categorized as a string, as a text, right? Your age, for example, is not so much of a string, because now we're talking about numeric values or numbers. Or the price of a product would not be a string, because now that's, we're talking about numeric values again. But going back to strings, it's a text surrounded by quotes. Now in Python, it can be either single quotes or it can be double quotes. So it doesn't really matter. There's special circumstances where you're actually going to need to use them together. Now I'll show you that example as well. But just to simplify it, it is just a text. String is just a text that starts with a quotation mark and ends with a quotation mark. It's a single quote and single quote, or double quote and double quote. Just make sure if you started with single, then ended with single quote, but otherwise you're just gonna get an error message, right? So let's see the other important or just basic data type, which is integers, right? Integers. Now, you probably remember from your math classes, integers would be just whole numbers, right? Again, it is just positive numbers or negative numbers and the zero, but it is a whole number, not anything, decimal with the point and stuff, right? So now we're clear what the string is and what strings look like, right? And what integers are, right? So this is two simple data types, but there's different, other data types in Python that we're going to cover in the actual, test automation classes, because that would be that wouldn't, fit in one lesson certainly. But let's go back to our platform again, and then here I'm going to ask you a question. So now, John, what data type does this belong to, right? This John. Now, is it a string or is it an integer? I mean, that certainly would be a very simple question. So it is a string because it's a text, right? So, and therefore, as I explained, it has to be surrounded by single quotes or double quotes, by quotation marks, basically. Whenever you don't do that, and that's one of the frequently made mistakes actually by the newly starters or new developers or QA engineers, they're learning and they forget the quotation marks, and then they think that it's going to work. And then if you click run, you're going to get this name error. As you can see, it says, oh, John is not defined, because I'm not sure what you're talking about. What John, right? I know print, but I don't know John. Is this something that I'm supposed to know? I don't have that in my library, basically. But if you put it, within the quotes, then it will be like, oh, okay, you just want to print the text. So it's just a text. Okay, So now, let's quickly do some exercise with the integers here as well. So you can print the integers just like you're printing the strings. So if we just put like 1,000 and then print, it would print 1,000. And interesting thing with the integers is that it works. The Python itself, or programming language, can do the calculations on the fly. So as you are it is executing your code, it can actually do mathematical operations as well. Like, for example, if I did 1000 plus 300, and then print, it would actually print the sum, right? So, but what happens if I put those, two values within the quotes now? And if I hit this, now, what do you think is going to happen? Now you can go ahead and type in your answers. So what do you think? What do you think is going to happen? I see some. Yes, exactly. So yeah, I'm getting some good answers here. So as soon as you enclose them, enclose means you're just putting them within the quotation marks, the program or the programming language is just going to think, okay, it just turned into a text, so I just have to print it as a text. All right. So let's remove that, and you can certainly make any multiplication here as well, and then you can multiply and add and so on. You can make divisions here as well, right? And here's another question that I just want to answer as well. Refactoring. That's another I would say more of a advanced topic. Refactoring is, you have a code, you've written lines of code that could be a part of the application. You're a programmer, imagine, or you're an automation tester, and you created your framework. But at the end, you just want to make that code more efficient, but the results is not changing in any way, right? It will work faster, but maybe it will actually take into account some other situations, some other exceptional situations, but the results shouldn't change, right? So that's called refactoring. You're just making your code more efficient, but at the end, it's just the same result, but you're not really typing in new code or creating new code. That's called refactoring, sort of, right? Maybe you just changing a file name could be refactoring as well. You just change the one variable name, but the whole thing, but the logic stays same. All right, but that's again a bit of a advanced concept, but just wanted to give you guys the answer here. Now, so there's another mathematical operation that we can talk about here that is frequently used is modulus. Modulus, that means finding the remainder. So if I would just divide 10 by 3, I would get this, 3-point and, endless numbers, right? But what if I want to get what is the remainder of this division, right? I'm interested in that concept, and I would use this percentage sign and hit enter. And as you can see, if you divide 10 by 3, what's the remainder? Remainder would be 1, right? So 3 times 3, 9, plus 1, that would make 10. So and this remainder using this modulus is actually used to solve one of the puzzles or interview questions that are usually given in the interview, saying, can you write a script we call as a functional method that will actually identify if the number is odd or even, right? So in that particular case, you would be actually looking for anything that's that can be divided by 2, and the remainder should be 0. But we'll, as part of our course, we will be covering many code challenges that are frequently asked in during the interviews. Okay, so we talked about the strings and integers, and I want to show you one interesting thing here. So how do you know that Python is actually treating this value as as a string? So just like print is one of the, sort of actions or functions that Python understands, there are many other built-in functions in that language. And one of those built-in functions is called type. So you see, when we said string or integer, we said data type or type of information, right? What type of information is this? Is this numeric value, or is this a text, or is this something else? So if you use that function here, right? As you can see that I'm just putting a function inside of a function, but don't get overwhelmed. It's just to show you that how Python understands the string, right? So when I type it and when I actually run it, as you can see, it says for the Python, it means you just gave an information that belongs to a class of str. Str stands for string, right? So for the Python, it's just, okay, the programmer just gave me something that looks like it is a string, it's a text. Now, what if I put this 1,000 or 10,000 here? Now, you see, it just changed. Okay, it's an int, right? This is how the Python is actually, clearly understanding that whatever data that you're giving, that actually belongs to certain data type. It has, it categorized, like this is text and this is numeric, and then there's another very interesting data type called booleans. Booleans, those are basically true and false, right? As you can see, it says it's a bool, so true and false, and those two values are very frequently used in in programming language. All right, so let me just quickly see some of the right questions here. Okay, great. Yeah, correct answers. All right, so now now I'm going to introduce you to an interesting concept called variables. All right, so variables. So what is a variable? What is a variable? Variable is a container to keep a reference to an information. So it's like a label, or it's like a shortcut. You can think of it that way, that is pointing to an information, right? But simply, to explain it simply, just think of it as a container, like a box with a label on it, and then you're getting the data and then putting that data in that box, right? So if you look at this example here, name equals John. So what I just did was I took the value or the information John, and then I put that inside the name, right? Sort of inside the name, right? So it's actually referring, or like it's like a link actually. So, and then whenever I call name, whenever I talk about name, then the Python will understand, oh, you mean John, right? Because you just said to Python, you just explained to Python that name from now on will be equal to John. All right, and then John's GPA, grade point, what was that, point average? So that score of John is equal to 4. So whenever I refer to a variable GPA, this is always going to be, at least until it's changed, it's going to be equal to 4. Okay, kind of sinks into the understanding when you practice it, certainly. So let's go back to our code editor, and then start typing, or actually let's create our first variable. I just came up with the name message, right? So I'm just going to give it a value. So hello world. So you see, this time what I did was I took the message, I took the information hello world, but then I'm saving it inside the variable called message. inside the variable called message, right? Sort of. Right now, what I can do is I can, I can still do, print hello world. Yes, it would print hello world, but I can also do simply print message. You see what's happening here? It is still, printing the hello world. Why? Because now the Python knows that the message is equal to hello world, right? So whenever I say, now print the message, please. So then it says, oh, I know what the message is because you just told me in the line 1 that what the message is, right? So what if I'm going to make the Python to forget the line 1, right? I can do that. So if I put this hash sign at the beginning of a line, if I put this hash sign, Python will actually ignore. For the Python, it will be like a ghost. It will just disappear from Python's view, right? And then Python won't see that line because it's commented out. Just like we commented a line out in SQL yesterday, but in SQL you were doing it with 2 dashes. You remember? So if I go back to the SQL and then if I put this 2 dash, and it will just, the whole thing will just, go away. You see, it's not, it doesn't return anymore. But if I remove it, then it's active again. So this is called commenting out. So it's just commented, and then the programming language will not see that. So now, guess what will happen? Guess what will happen, right? So now Python will not see that, and then I'm gonna click the run button, and I'm asking Python to print the message. Now tell me what's gonna happen now. If I click, is it gonna click hello world, or what is it gonna say? And how the Python interpreter or the language is gonna actually react. So I got a message that says nothing. All right, so okay, it's still gonna print. So several answers. So here's what's going to happen. It is going to throw an error. But can you guess what kind of error message that we're going to get? What type of error message? Is it going to throw a name error or syntax error? Name or syntax, right? The answer is yes. The answer is name, because it means I don't know what that is, right? It's not that your syntax is English. It's not that you forgot some parentheses or the quote or some symbol. It looks like your code is correct, but unfortunately, I don't understand what the message is because you didn't teach me yet, right? You didn't tell me yet. So we're just gonna put that back and click again, and it works perfectly fine, right? So here's another interesting thing that you can do with Python is that whenever you're printing, you can. So you saw that you can actually multiply the numbers, right? But you can also multiply the letters. So that's very interesting. That sort of functionality, a feature of the Python. So let's say if I wanted to print this particular letter several times, or the character several times, and you would actually do that. This is what sometimes what we use to create, like messages or a line before your before you actually create your log files, and we'll talk about the log files in the actual lesson. So all right, so with that, let's continue working on the variables. How about we're going to create a variable called age, right? Variable called age, and then age is going to be equal to 20. And if you want to open a Gmail account, for example, there's age restriction normally. So if you end up saying end up being anywhere between actually, younger than 13, the Google will probably tell you, oh, I'm sorry, you're too young. So there's another platform, or you have to get a permission from your parent or something like that. So, and you see, how does the programming actually make such decisions? Plain English. So we're gonna write like, okay, if age is more than 13, right? If age is more than 13, then we're gonna print a message here saying, okay, welcome, and please select. Let me just decrease the size here a little bit so that you can see the whole sentence here. Please select email ID or something like that, right? So if I would go ahead and run this code here, as you can see, it says, welcome, please select an email ID, right? So now, what if I change this value to anything, like 10, like below 13? It would do nothing, because our condition is only for, right? This line of code, line 4, will run only if the age is more than 13. So for the code to run some other outcome, we need to give that another second branch of the decision making, which is called else, right? Again, simple English. So we're saying, if your age is more than 13, just pay attention to the syntax here as well, right? There is this special, colon sign, and whenever you hit enter, it actually puts you to the correct place. And Python is all about indentation, like the space. Python is about space. And that's why it's actually simpler than when you compare it to Java. Java is more of, then that's where you will be using curly braces and semicolons and so on, right? So, but here it's more cleaner. That's at least my opinion. So then we're going to go with the else condition. So we're saying, okay, so we have a message to print if the person is older than 13, but do we have a message to print if the person is younger than 13? Then we can simply say print, and we can just say like, all right, so oops, please, right? So you are too young, something like that. So now if I run, you are too young, right? But if it is 23, then it will be okay. What did we just get? Okay, no, this is not the variable that I was supposed to change. This stays as 13, but if we change the actual variable as a 23, this time we're gonna get welcome, please select email ID. So there's another branch here that you can also use, which is you're going to add an additional check here. Now, what if the person just turned 13, right? Just turned 13, and then there for that you have to add the else and if together, and it becomes elif, right? So it's just the way the Python creator decided that it should be. Instead of saying else if, you just say elif age is equal to 13. You see that two double equal sign that I'm putting here, right? So this is when you are comparing, right? Whenever you're comparing two values, then for the equality, then you're going to use double equation sign. Now again, those who are absolutely new to Python, I know we have those who are completely new, and we also have in the audience some attendees who already took some classes, doing self-study, or actively looking for a job, or already working. So those who are actually new, don't get overwhelmed with what you're seeing, because this is, we're going to more of an advanced concept like conditional statements, like if and else. You certainly go, to that level step by step and slowly. But, as part of this sessions, we're trying to meet everybody's needs and just giving you the overall picture, right? Okay, so if the age is exactly 13, then we're going to say, okay, great, you are just in time, right? Something like that. So now if the age is in fact just 13, right? I mean, exactly 13. If I run, then you're going to get this message. It says, oh, great, you're just in time, right? Okay. Now, let's go and see some of what types of automated. So there's a question, what types of automated testing will be covered in this course? So we will actually introduce you to the, if your question is about the free class, then tomorrow is dedicated for the test automation, but certainly it will be more of an introduction to test automation. But overall, if you're talking about an actual class, actual courses that are starting in September, you will be actually learning different test automation frameworks, such as page object model and data-driven frameworks as well, and using Python and PyTest and in Visual Studio Code. And there are some other concepts that we're going to cover. But okay, all right, okay. Yes, API will be part of the actual courses as well. Yes. Okay. Now, apart from that, let's so we talked about if and else here, right? So now I want you to I want to give you some additional interesting information here as well, which is collection of values. Certain data types, they contain not just one value, but several values, right? So you see, initially we had just one variable, and then which is equal to, for example, John, right? What if I want to, well, I have like several values that I want to put into one container, something like that, like friends, for example, right? So I have many friends, and like John and Jane and Jennifer. So what do I want to do? I don't know, how can I actually put that in one variable? For that, there's a data type called the list, and there are other similar data types as well. So in Python, the syntax is something like that. So it is hard brackets, and here you can put Jane, and then the John, and then the Jennifer here as well, right? So what if now I want to say hello to each of those friends, right? Think of it. So I want to say I have a list now. Imagine I have how many attendees, we have this for this webinar, right? I have 200 attendees, and I want to say hello to everybody, right? I want to send a separate message. Now, do you think I have to write like 200 or over 200 lines of code to say, hello to everybody, or to say, or after the class, like, thank you for attending the class, and something like that, right? So in programming, there's something called as loop, right? So looping is doing the, executing the same code over and over again and being more efficient. Actually, programming is all about being more efficient, right? You have to be really, really lazy. You have to think lazy, and then find the easiest way, or getting to the point with the least or the fewest number of lines of code, basically, right? So it is another advanced concept here, which is called loops, and you're going to get there step by step, certainly. And just follow along. So I'm just going to say, for each friend in the friends list, right? for each of my friend in the friends list, just print hello. So for now, this time, I just want to say hello. And obviously, it's going to print hello 3 times because I have 3 friends, right? In this list. If I add another person here, let's say N, it's going to print now 4 times. Now, that looks okay, but what if I want to customize that a little bit? I actually want to mention their names as well, right? Not just say hello, but I want to be a bit more personal here. So you could do that, and it's called something in Python as F string, or formatting the string. You can format the text here. So now we're going to say hello, but we're going to mention our friend here as well. But there's a syntax here that you are going to have to kind of remember. And again, it comes with practice, right? It comes with practice. There's a special approach that where you can use a formatting of a string, and then this variable coming into my string. And if I print now, as you can see, now I can print more of a customized message to everybody, right? Okay, so this is called as looping, right? That's something that also you're going to learn as part of your classes. Now, loops also, there are different types of loops, and what you just saw was a for loop. For loop, when you know how many times you're going to loop. Right? You have a list of friends, or your list of, values, a range of numbers that you're going to use to loop. Now, what if there could be a scenario or a test case or situation where you don't know how many times you have to loop, right? So in that particular case, there's a special type of loop called while loop, right? While a certain button is disabled, just, keep waiting or keep validating or something like that, right? And there are many, different actual scenarios in test automation for that. But to be able to strong in test automation, you have to be strong in programming language. That's the key. There's no way around it. So you have to be strong in one of the programming languages. And I personally recommend Python, and I think the market is shifting to Python eventually. From Java into Python. So while, and I'm going to use another built-in function here, just like a type or just like a print. It's called input, right? Input. The purpose of the input function is it's going to take an information or basically it's going to take a data from the user. So you'll see it in action. So let's say is your kid asking they don't want to go to sleep, and they're asking you to give, especially, kids do before they go to sleep, I'm hungry, or, I don't want to sleep. So, and then you keep asking, right? Until like, are you still hungry? All right. So you're still hungry. So let's put that question here. Are you still hungry? And, and if the answer is yes, then we're going to keep saying, okay, here you go. Eat some more. Okay, so now, oops. So let's run. And as you can see, it's asking me, all right, so are you still hungry? So if I say yes, the program didn't end, right? So it says, here we go, it's some more. And the question is asked again, are you still hungry? So I can say yes, yes. And then at some point I can say no, and the program ends, right? I mean, I could also put something like after the program saying like, oh, finally, let's go to sleep now. So, all right, so let's do that. Go to sleep now. All right. So if I run that program again, so yes, yes, if I say no, and we'll get this message, oh, finally, go to sleep now, right? Now, what if, you see, who can actually break this program? Tell me. So there's something, there's a bug in this program actually, right? Any ideas? So you see, in this program, I can, let me start that again. What if I say yes, but with the capital letters? Oh, finally go to sleep. You see? So that's not what we were expecting, right? So, and then this happens a lot. I mean, whenever you're coding, whenever you're comparing two values, in this case sensitivity kicks in, and you have to watch and you have to know how to handle it. So in Python, there's a method called lower, and basically what we're doing is the value that we're taking from the user, we're putting that into a lower case. So now, regardless of if I put yes or if I put yes, it just keeps working, right? Yes, keeps working. But if I say anything other than yes, like nope, and the program ends.